Hello, Sage colleagues. In this video, I'm going to talk about the seeding and planting calendar spreadsheet. This has two tabs, this spreadsheet. It has a tab for natives and a tab for edible plants. So keep an eye on those two tabs. And now, just like I said in the last video, I do hope you'll contribute to this knowledge base. So you'll see I did a couple species as an example. So let's start here. I have it small so you can see the full effect, but let's do black Krim tomato. So black Krim is my favorite tomato. It's a giant tomato, great for like caprese salads, for sandwiches, etc. I can just eat it like an apple. But I'm showing you the seed packet because Bounty Beyond Belief is one of the reliable Colorado-based seed companies. When you're planting edible plants, it's important that you consider heirloom vegetables. Much as we hear with our natives and their depression in genetic diversity due to a loss of habitat. This same thing is happening in our edible crops, okay? We have reduced the genetic diversity in our edible crops such that it's a tenuous situation with climate change evolving on our planet. Planting heirloom vegetables basically increases that genetic diversity, keeps old world plants in our genetic vernacular, so that if our basic Roma tomatoes could no longer be grown because of their genetic depression, we would have other plants to work with. So here's the back of the seed packet. And this has most of the information you need, but you might have collected seeds that don't have packets. You can find this information with a basic internet search. Just search by the name and say seeding requirements or germination requirements. So let's take a look. I'm sure you've all seen a seed packet before, but all the information you need to fill out the calendar is written here, and we just want to digest it into a place where we can see all of our plants explained in the same location. So let's take a look at that spreadsheet. So I took the species name and the Latin name, and then I ascertained if it was warm season or cool season. And a tomato is a warm season crop. Oops, I don't know why this keeps coming up like that. All right, and then I looked in the weather.gov website. There's others like the Western Regional Climate Center, or just your local news station might even have it. You can find out what the average last frost date is. And if you add this to our collective spreadsheet, please make a notation of where you are so we can keep track of where this information applies to. And then we want to look at the average first frost. And so I put these right next to each other because this is basically your opportunity, right? This looks to me like an opportunity that is just shy of 5 months. That's my growing season. And then sometime a week or two after the first frost, there's the first hard freeze. The first hard freeze is 28 degrees or lower, and this is typically a plant killing freeze. Whereas the frost, you could use some covers, row covers, that kind of thing, to extend for those last few weeks. And then from the seed packet, you can ask, can it be planted before last frost? Yes or no. In the case of tomatoes, no. Typically, if you said warm over here, you're going to say no over here. If you say cool over here, you're going to say yes over here, okay? And then the seed packet or the information resource you're using will tell you, is it recommended for indoor germination? Some plants are really hard to germinate inside, or they're easy to germinate but hard to transplant. For example, I know that carrots hate to be transplanted, but for whatever reason, I am growing them right now in my daughter's Dutch Bros and Starbucks giant plastic cups because I want to make use of those plastic cups. So we'll see. You can always defy these recommendations or experiment to get past them. And so I found on the back of the seed packet that black grim tomatoes take 5 to 10 days to germinate. In a really good germination chamber, you can get anything to germinate in under 5 days, I've found. Any edible plant, I should say, not natives. And then days to maturity. So I just pitched to 90 days, just the average between this number, 3 months, okay? And then the first harvest possible, if planted in the ground, equals the last frost date plus the germination days plus the days to maturity. And that equals the first harvest date. So if I do my backwards math here, and I found that I could plant after 5/9, right? I just 3 months ahead of that would be 8/9, August 9th, okay? And now if I want to like be in a state where my plants are nearly flowering by the time it's warm enough outside for them to live there, I'll need to seed them and I'll need to make use of my indoor space to cover some of these 90 days to maturity. So I just said 2 months ahead of first frost, right? You don't want to leave plants inside for too long. And as soon as they can go outside, you should put them outside, even if it's just for like a couple of hours so they can harden off. So if I planted seeds on 3/9 of tomatoes, I would probably be looking to put them outside for a couple of hours a day, starting in mid-April, if not earlier. You just don't want them to be very leggy, but you also don't want them to get out on a 70-degree day and just burn because they haven't seen the actual sun yet. And then in column M, you could continue that math, right? I could plant every 2 weeks, so I would have plants ready to harvest throughout the growing season. And then the last column in this spreadsheet is just references. Where'd you get that information? If you don't have a seed packet, you might just look it up on the internet. For example, we're going to go over here to blanket flower, and these are just seeds I collected in my garden. So I had to look up the USDA plants database document. Okay, so here's our edible plants. It's not too complex, but you can see that if we work together, this process could go a lot more smoothly and more efficiently. So if you want to enter, let's say, your top 2 species into the spreadsheet at least, and then of course you can use the species that your peers have also entered if you are interested in them for your garden. Now in the other spreadsheet of this other tab of this spreadsheet, native plants, we can do the same thing. But what we'll see is that it's actually way less complicated. And if you watch my Horticultural Art Society video, you'll hopefully be convinced that planting natives inside is not necessary. You don't have to do that. You can just put the seeds outside where they are adapted to the conditions. But for the fun of it, let's go through it. So blanket flower. Here are some seeds that one of my friends gave me. I was in her garden and she was like, here's some blanket flower. Why don't you just snip off some of those? Which I did, of course, but then I didn't do anything with them until now. And so they've just been sitting in this little jar in my kitchen. And there are still seeds there, so that's good. But I don't have a seed packet, so how do I know what to do? And actually, I already tried to germinate these seeds and it didn't work. So I was worried that it needed some cold stratification, and since they've been sitting in my kitchen, they did not get that. So I went over to the plants database and I looked up the blanket flower. Now I'm going to back out of here for just a second. This is the same in iNaturalist, right? Once you get to the right website, you can just delete the extension and then go back and enter the name here. Oh boy, spelling this word is going to be hard. Let's see. I'll click on the species and then scroll around the page. All the pages don't look exactly the same, but somewhere behind this little table are these fact sheets and plant guides if they're available. But you can see the pictures are never great on the USDA Plants Database website. But there's this cool map, a little different than the map that we're used to seeing in iNaturalist. But here you can see nativity based on color. So let's click into this plant guide. And we looked at this briefly before, but as we scroll down, establishment. Plant giftflower may be grown from seed or division of vegetative parts. The seed does not require cold stratification. Yes. For range planting, seed should be planted into a firm, weed-free seed bed, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, I got my answer I needed for my spreadsheet. And the question was stratification, scarification? No, not necessary. So that's good. It's not too late. I can take this little dried bouquet and put it in the garden. I also learned from the the plant guide that spring seeding is best, and that these seeds can be directly sown outdoors. And so I might just go right when I finish this video and put these seeds in my front garden. And I know that Gaillardia, the blanket flower, it requires full sun. And I'm going to put it in my front bed because in the front of my beds because it's not tall if not watered. And then also Rudbeckia hirta, this is another one. This is not on the plant list, that last spreadsheet I talked about, but one that you just have to have. It's so easy. It bounces around. You can just snap off the cone flowers and shove them in the ground with your thumb whenever you find them in your garden or along dog walks in other people's gardens, or out in the wilds. Although seed collection in the wilds, you've got to make sure you have permission to do that. I got these seeds from the Colorado Springs Utilities. They give them out at various talks and events. And I read that cold increases the germination rate. But I know that black-eyed Susan, I have that it's like grasses. The seeds stay on the stem, and I have definitely snapped those off and put them in the ground whenever I found them, and they still germinate. There's no mention of scarification required for this particular plant. Now, if I want to start it inside, the key to starting plants inside is you don't want to put outside like a 5-day plant, right? So if you're going to bother doing it, but make it worthwhile and in advance of when you could put it outside, you do have to start several weeks beforehand. So you have an actual seedling to plant out, not a tiny little baby plant. And they could be planted indoors or outdoors, right? But what I read was that it's a winter sowing, right? So cold increases germination, but is not absolutely required according to what I've read. But winter sowing is best. So if I am going to go snap off the rest of the heads that I can see in my garden, I should do it real soon. And I'm sure we will have at least 1, 2, 3 more snows that will push us below. I know for sure that like even tomorrow, even though it's 70 degrees out, it will get down to 28 degrees at the next 3 nights, I think, in Colorado Springs. So it's never too late. Give it a try. And if your plants don't germinate this year, they'll germinate next year.